I guess I should formally remove 5.1.
5.6.
Councilmember Moss? No, and I have nothing. So let's go to item 5.1.
I submitted small corrections to the minutes, which you, looks like a hard copy of which you have on the dais, and that is all.
Thank you. I omitted to ask if any member of the audience present has a desire to have anything removed from the consent calendar. Seeing none, we'll proceed to 5-6.
Thank you. I pulled this item tonight to call attention to the importance of screening and early detection of breast cancer. On July 22nd, I went for my yearly routine mammogram. There was something this time that raised some concerns. After several more mammograms and biopsies, I was diagnosed with DCIS, a form of breast cancer. More tests followed, and then I had surgery, a double lumpectomy. This morning, I finished a 4-week daily radiation program. Although I had a different plan in mind for our August recess, because this cancer was caught so early, all of the treatment was relatively easy and the prognosis positive. I'm only sharing this with you to encourage all of you to get your routine checks. Be sure that all your family and friends get checked as appropriate for their age and gender. And don't forget the skin cancer checks. Early diagnosis is the key to survival, not only for breast cancer, but for all other types of cancer. If you're fortunate enough to have good insurance that covers the cost both of proactive screening and care, please give some thought to donating a little bit to organizations that provide services to those who need a little help. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I will move the consent calendar with the amended minutes.
I'll second.
May we have a roll call?
Councilmember Moss?
Yes.
Councilmember Pilch?
Yes.
Vice Mayor McQuaid?
Yes.
Mayor Nason?
Yes.
And the motion carries.
We go on to number 6, good of the city and public comment. This section of the agenda is for persons desiring to address the City Council on an item that is not on the agenda. Please note that city policy limits each speaker to 3 minutes. The Brown Act limits the council's ability to take or discuss items that are not on the agenda. Such items are normally referred to staff for comment or to a future agenda. Do we have speaker cards for
Yes.
public comment?
Yes. Peter Campbell, Susan Schwartz, and Brian Martin.
Good evening, Council and Mayor. Peter Campbell, Albany resident, and President of the Albany Property Rights Advocates Organization, commonly known as APRA. We met at our board meeting earlier this week, actually, and passed the following through our board. It's a resolution that we would like the City Council to consider at some future date. I know you can't do it tonight. So the resolution reads as follows. Whereas recently passed state law limits rent increases to 5% per annum plus the cost of living, and whereas this rent increase exceeds Albany's rent review triggered by the inflation rate, and whereas recently passed state law adds eviction restrictions that Albany doesn't presently have, and whereas Albany's rent review has only been invoked a very few times to date, and whereas rent review is unlikely to be invoked at all given the limits imposed by state law, and whereas Albany's rent review fee was intended to cover the cost of implementing the rent review process and not a revenue-generating measure, and whereas Albany is unlikely to spend any significant funds on rent review in the upcoming years because of the state limits, be it resolved that the Albany Property Rights Advocates calls on the Albany City Council to rescind the rent review ordinance as quickly as possible so that city staff can remove the charge from the 2020 business license invoices and to refund excess funds to property owners in the form of a future business license fee one-time credit. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Susan Schwartz, head of Friends of Five Creeks. We're a 24 or something year old all volunteer creek and watershed restoration group founded here in Albany. I wanted first to invite you and everyone to our work party on the creek this Saturday. We will have 25 Berkeley Project UC students, but they like to have community members too. And I hope you'll all come out and see the wonderful progress that has been made there since we have the maintenance fund. We also have another startup coming in November. We're looking forward to a field trip with Ocean View School. We've had 2 other firms. We had a really nice walk with the Parks Commission. Maintenance is greatly improved. There are things that need to be dealt with, like litter scheduling, but the fact that Albany is having Margot Cunningham hire people, it's just not creepy anymore. What can I say? Everything is much, much better. Please come out and enjoy it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Martin?
Hi, I'm Brian Martin, resident of the 600 block of Adams Street. I'm here to talk about electrical power safety, and with the recent PG&E power outages, planned power outages near us, and the danger of wildfires, I think it's good to reflect on what happened in Albany just a few months ago. In July, my block was out of power. We had all heard a really loud electrical sounding noise. People up and down my long block and around the corner, and I was going around the block to get people to come out for National Night Out, and people were like, what happened? What was that? And our power was out. It was only out for one evening, but the concerning thing was that one of my neighbors he had looked up down the block, and he had seen huge electrical arcs and sparks. And so I've contacted the city, and so you all may be aware of some of those email exchanges to try to get this looked into, to get an incident report from PG&E. I know the fire department has provided one. Nicole's been working on some of the aspects of that. This is at Madison Street and Castro where this happened. The fire department responded and tried to keep the peace and keep any fires out. Thankfully, there's almost no brush there. There's just somebody's green lawn and a scrawny tree far away. But if this is at the base of Albany Hill, and then PG&E came back to the city. I see this correspondence and just said this was a result of a burnt open jumper. And jumpers, I looked into it, that's where 2 tensioned electrical lines come together at a pole, and the jumper just kind of connects them. And they said a jumper is not a piece of equipment that is under tension, but due to winds and corrosion, it can fail. Even with routine regular maintenance, a jumper can fail. Given the environmental conditions in the Bay Area, it can happen. I mean, it sounds like they're shrugging. It's like, you know. So we need to follow, the city needs to follow up on this, get the incident report, which is now, what, 3-4 months, they haven't come up with an incident report, and needs to find out more about, okay, how do these jumpers work? I mean, it wasn't a transformer that was making all that noise. It was these sparks from wires that was making all these noise. I also wanted to thank the city for their work to get the electrical lines that are redone up at the cross on the hill, because of course those were going through a tree, and if that kind of thing had been happening right there with all that kindling and everything, then it would have been, I'm sure, a very different outcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comment? Do we have more speaker cards? Does anyone wish to speak? No? Then we will move on to council subcommittee reports, council member reports on appointed representation of Albany and other meetings and events. The first item is that council subcommittees report if they have met in council, and so we'll go to that. I believe that Vice Mayor McQuaid will report on the Community Inclusivity Subcommittee.
Thank you. Last Saturday, Mayor Nason and I attended a forum for residents of the condos at Pierce Street, which was hosted by the Gateview Homeowners Forum Committee. There were about 30 people in attendance, which included community members of all ages, races, ethnicities, genders, and abilities. We shared information on housing and transportation, Peggy Thompson Pierce Street Park, the Alta Bates Hospital closure impacts, the bulb, and Albany Hill. The audience asked us questions and shared concerns about the Saha development, traffic and speeding, and Albany Hill. We plan to do more of these forums in the coming months, as it's a great way to talk face-to-face with people who do not usually come to City Hall meetings, enabling us to better understand their concerns and to give them an opportunity to learn more about how city government works and how they can become a part of the process.
Thank you. Any other subcommittee reports to be taken? Okay, then we move on to reports on local, state, or regional government meetings at which we have represented the city of Albany. I've provided a written report on the board and committee meetings of Stop Waste and the Alameda County Transportation Commission. And those are in the packet with links to the agenda packets. The one item that is probably of greatest significance for Albany is the capital program update of the Alameda County Transportation Commission, which includes Interstate 80 interchange improvements at Gilman Street in Berkeley, next to Albany, which is scheduled to begin in the spring, and the San Pablo Avenue corridor multimodal improvements, which you will find an update on the phasing. It is thought to be something that will begin in early 2020. Are there other reports on meetings? I did realize there was a late-breaking meeting, which I did not include, and that was the 2x2x2, but I will include a written report on that next time. Anything else? Other meetings? Okay, Councilmember Pilch.
Sure. Oh, sorry. Did you have something, Pete?
I'm not, both the vice mayor and myself were at a design review for Ocean View School, but I'm not sure that falls on.
Yeah, that's sort of the next
subcategory. So I, along with the EBC staffer Melissa Brandt, met with Buffy Wicks to discuss EBC priorities, our assembly member. And I believe that we gave a photo gift, is that right? Yeah, and that's above her desk, apparently. Yeah, so she appreciated that one. And I attended the League of California Cities annual conference all 3 days. I participated as a member of the Environmental Quality Policy Committee, where we voted on a couple of resolutions, and then we, at the end, the voting members voted to approve the resolutions as they were amended. One had to do with making sure that cities could more easily get money for undergrounding utilities. So as amendment of Rule 20, CPUC Rule 20. And the other was something that I'm forgetting right now. But it was approved exactly along the lines that, as was stated in the last city council packet where I brought the resolution to you. If I remember, I'll let you know. The conference was great and featured El Cerrito several times. The El Cerrito city manager was featured talking about the San Pablo Avenue specific plan, and the mayor also had a little cameo video about that, and they also won a Beacon Award, I believe, about environmental sustainability. I can't remember the details of that. Many other good things at the conference.
Very good, thank you. Vice Mayor McQuaid, do you have reports?
We're on 7.3?
We're still on 7.2.
No, I don't then.
Okay. Well, then I think we can move on to section 7.3, which is other meetings and events that we have attended. Would you like to start?
Oh, sure. I think that at least 3 of us, the mayor and vice mayor and myself, were at the fire department pancake breakfast. I also was at the Albany Community Center Art Gallery opening reception for the quilt art. And I'm forgetting the artist's name right now, but I do recommend you go check it out. Very nice display. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Vice Mayor McQuaid?
Okay, I participated, I believe, along with the mayor with the Climate Mayors Conference call. I represented Albany at the Alameda County Mayors Conference. As Councilmember Moss said, we went to a design review on the new Ocean View School. Pancake breakfast was wonderful as always. I attended the City of Berkeley Disaster Fair, the 2x2x2. I hosted my quarterly community leaders meeting. I participated in the CERT final exam. I attended the CHP and Police Department presentation for teen driver safety. And I attended the Day of Remembrance ceremony for victims of domestic violence, which was hosted by DA Nancy O'Malley. And I also want to give a shout out to the art exhibit right now. It's Councilmember Pilch mentioned it at the community center. If you haven't seen it, you absolutely have to go see it. It is just fabulous. And that's it.
Thank you. Councilmember Moss?
Only the Ocean View review that actually my wife was presenting, so I had to go to that one.
You had to go to that one. Well, thank you. I'm glad the two of you did that, and I'm also grateful to the two of you for going to the Mayor's Conference, which happened to be held on Yom Kippur. Let's see. My main report, I think most of everything I attended has already been mentioned, with the exception of a meeting that I requested with the representatives of the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, which has built a large parking lot in the Caltrans right-of-way below Interstate 80, as probably everyone has seen. It's quite a site, 261 spaces, including, now I'm trying to remember the number, but there's a large number of electric vehicle charging stations. When we took the report when we heard from them 2 years ago, they had reported that they would have conduits, but they will actually have charging stations, as well as bike parking. The main reason for our meeting was to get an update on that and other outstanding questions, but we also wanted to discuss the possibility. Right now, the plan is that parking lot will be closed and locked on weekends, and even though it's right on the Bay Trail, and so we're hoping to begin a dialogue about the potential use of that parking for recreationists on the weekends. I attended the Regional Parks Gala dinner. I may have already reported as a member of the Parks Advisory Committee that our representative, Whitney Dotson, has resigned. Effective in December, and the Park District is conducting a process for our representative, the representative of our region. I also attended the North Richmond Festival, where I learned about Richmond efforts that affect our work on the Alta Bates effort. An organization has formed to look into what to do about hospital access for the Richmond area. And I attended a plastics talk at Belmont Village about how we can, by Martin Bourke of the Berkeley's Environmental Center, regarding what we can do to reduce the amount of plastic going into landfills. I think everything else was mentioned, so we'll move along to the city manager report.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a couple of slides, but my mouse isn't working. So we'll see. Otherwise, I'll just do it by verbal report here. PG&E, unfortunately, has announced another power shutoff this week, perhaps starting Wednesday, and I want to correct the record, unfortunately, that customers in our area may have received that it would affect Albany, apparently a call went out. They have rescinded that. It was a mistake, and Albany currently isn't affected. So just want to make sure folks are clear on that, because I know there's a lot of concern with preparing for those incidents. I also want to take a moment to thank all of our emergency response staff and department staff who worked through the power safety shutoff outreach and activity that we had just a short while ago. It was actually a really helpful practice drill for us in terms of preparing for emergencies and unexpected situations. Our city also hosted a biannual Public Art Administrators Network NorCal meeting this past Friday. It's a coalition of public art administrators across the San Francisco Bay Area, Northern California. So this room was basically full with those department heads and administrators, and they also took a tour of Albany Bulb. So we were happy to host them. City staff also participated in a mandatory harassment, discrimination, retaliation, prevention training, and that was, again, something mandatory for all of our staff because we feel that's critical, and it's also mandatory by law. So we have completed that, and we're proud of getting everyone in one room and taking that training. A couple of other things coming up for those of you that may be residents or know folks on Albany Hill. As you know, wildfire concerns are here and now, and we will be doing, as part of our our efforts to be proactive in emergency preparations, on Sunday, November 3rd, we'll have a city-led evacuation of Albany Hill. Outreach is going out, as well as in our city newsletter. I have a map here. Area that we'll be focusing on. A little hard to see with the colors, but primarily the pink area here is the evacuation area. I also wanted to take a moment to thank our fire department for once again having their open house and pancake breakfast. As a reminder, the funds raised at this event go to the Burn Foundation. So we, as always, raised a significant amount of funds, and we saw the fire department working very hard for a few hours there. Let's see, anything else here? Another thing on our website, unfortunately I don't have it up right now, but I'll put it up as we go along. The city is collecting the hotel occupancy tax on short-term rentals, and this is a new endeavor for us, but it's an ordinance that's been on the books for many, many, many years. And as many of us know, short-term rentals are fairly new, so this will be something implemented over the course of several months. But for those that may have some sort of short-term rental arrangement, please be prepared to receive some notification regarding new collection on those types of facilities. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I should comment that with regard to the sexual harassment training, that's not only mandatory for staff, it's also mandatory for council members. So if anybody has not done that yet, you might want to check out those requirements. We have no presentations tonight. We go to our public hearing for the evening, which is ordinance number 2019-08, amending Chapter 14, work on public property of the Albany Municipal Code regarding small wireless facilities, the first reading.
Is it okay to make a brief comment about what the
No.
manager's report was?
No, well, no, I'm sorry. That would be something that would be a comment for the non-agenda portion of the meeting. I would suggest that you approach the city manager after the meeting and give her your comment, and if it's something that is important to be shared, we'll do that at the next meeting in 2 weeks. Thank you. So the public hearing, may I see a show of hands of people who are here to comment on this item? Is there anyone? We have one person. Here is our situation. We received a late-breaking comment on the item that I think that we need to consider and get a response to prior to voting even on the first reading for this item. So I'm going to suggest that tonight we take an abbreviated version of our presentation. We take public comment from the individual who is here to comment, but that we then, I will then move to defer this item to the next agenda. So may we have an abbreviated staff report, and we will have the staff report in greater depth 2 weeks from now.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jean Iceberg. I'm a contract planner with the city. In recent years, wireless facilities have become an increasingly visible aspect of our urban infrastructure. They allowed for high-speed internet access for residents, businesses, and smart infrastructure in our communities, and we're placing a higher demand on these facilities as hardware technology changes. So we can expect that wireless providers will seek to increase the density of these facilities through small, low-powered antennas that extend coverage areas. We can also expect that some of these facilities are going to be located in our public right-of-ways. So that is our item tonight, and we anticipated some of what Mayor Nason just suggested and recommended, that we continue this item to November 4th. So I'm going to skip over a number of items at the mayor's suggestion, but we'll try to give you a high-level review of the report so far. So the amendments before you are to Chapter 14 of the ordinance, which is only reviewed by the City Council. This is, next slide. This is, currently the city has on the books wireless facilities regulated on private property in Chapter 20. We're also going to be recommending changes to that to be consistent with federal law, probably early next year. But right now, since the way it is now, encroachment permits are regulated in Chapter 14, and there are really no rules for wireless utilities in the public right-of-way specifically. And so that's why these ordinance amendments were proposed here. So just to explain what small cell facilities are, again, these are low-powered antennas that provide coverage to smaller areas. This is not necessarily the size of the actual wireless facility. It's just the small, and the small cells refers to the coverage area. And this is what they look like. This is a pole top mounted example with the antenna on top, and then enclosures enclosing electric facilities, other accessory equipment. In this example, this is a sidearm example. So again, this is in response to new federal legislation clarifying the intent of the Telecommunications Act with respect to local regulations for small wireless facilities, and specifically identifying timelines for review and approval. The interpretation of what local governments can regulate are that any rules and requirements have to be clear, reasonable, and feasible. And this has been interpreted to mean that local governments can regulate these facilities as long as so things like height, appearance, location and placement, and safety issues for wireless facilities in the public right-of-way. Cities can require permits, identify application requirements, regulate design, charge fees, recurring fees, application fees, and stipulate public notification requirements. So I'm going to skip through most of the specific details, but essentially this is how the ordinance is framed. There are cross-references to the design criteria in Chapter 20 where wireless facilities are regulated in private property, and then additional standards are added that make sense for the public right-of-way specifically in terms of heights, in terms of ensuring protections of existing street trees, avoiding interactions with street lights, signage, fire hydrants, other items found in the public right-of-way. What the ordinance does not do is regulate geographic location, and the staff report notes that the existing regulations regulate a number of things that are inconsistent with federal law, and so right now those are not being enforced in terms of geographic location. Okay, I'm going to skip through this part. Some of the design criteria that are regulated in Chapter 20 and additions for public right-of-way specifically, and we can come back to these when we meet next time. In terms of operation and maintenance, the ordinance proposes an operation and maintenance agreement, identifies signage for contact information in case of emergency, talks about cleanliness, as well as spot checks of radio frequency to ensure compliance with the federal thresholds. One thing that is new here is a post-installation certification to ensure that the radio frequencies, limits, and standards meet federal requirements. Also new application requirements, so applicants that are applying for a ministerial permit review otherwise wouldn't have to do public notification, and this recommends requiring public notification in those instances. And then in terms of submittal requirements, including photo simulations, so you could see how these wireless facilities would look in the photo context, requiring the radio frequency report, as I mentioned, instituting very specific fees. Right now, the fee structure is basically time, staff time, and then again, acknowledging the review timelines per the federal law, shot clocks, as they call them. Several levels of permit review. If existing wireless facilities are just being replaced, that would be subject to a zoning clearance at the staff level. Next level, if there are co-location of on existing poles where wireless facilities have been approved, that would also be a staff ministerial action. All other applications, such as a new structure where an antenna was located on a new structure, that would go to the Planning Commission. All of these approvals are subject to appeal by the City Council, and all of these permits would require all of the zoning permits would require a building permit. As mentioned, today we received a comment letter from AT&T's legal counsel and a number of points that they raised, and those are the items that we would like to review in more detail along with the city attorney. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, are there questions from the council that anyone would like to pose tonight, or with the understanding that we will be taking this up again at the first meeting in November? You do have a question, okay?
I do have one. There was mention in the report that if we've already undergrounded our telephone, PG&E, et cetera, that we are requesting that the wireless companies put their antennas underground. I don't know, with this latest letter that we've gotten from AT&T, I don't know where that stands in relationship to that. But I also wondered if we were to underground an existing street that had telephone poles that maybe the antennas are on top of at some later date, would they then also have to be undergrounded, or would they have the right to keep the telephone poles in place just for those antennas?
I don't have an answer for you right now. My understanding, though, is that the antennas do need to be above ground. The accessory equipment is the part that could be below ground.
Okay.
So in that case, presumably there would still be poles for streetlights or traffic signals. So there could be another option.
Okay. Would they also then have the report all talks in terms of using existing telephone poles, but I'm also taking it that they will have the option of putting up their own poles if they didn't find a suitable lighting pole or some alternative to a telephone pole. They would be able to say, okay, we're going to put a pole up right here and put it on the public right away.
It could be any pole. It could be a new pole. The ordinance expresses a preference for existing poles, but not necessarily power poles. So street lights, other existing poles in the right-of-way.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
But would AT&T or Verizon or anyone else be able to say, we don't like any of those poles, we want a pole in this spot where there is no pole, and we'll just put one up right there?
That is possible, yes.
Perhaps that's something that can also be looked at between now and the next meeting. Thank you. No other questions. Then, Mr. Fields, would you like to make your public comment?
Thank you. Good evening. In Ordinance 2015-03, you continued the prohibition of wireless facilities in residential districts. In the ordinance before you tonight, you are removing that prohibition and allowing antennas to be placed on power poles in the public right-of-way in front of our and your homes. I urge you not to do that. The ordinance states, whereas it is inferred that the City of Albany may control height, appearance, location/placement, and safety issues for wireless facilities in the public right-of-way. This is still allowed by the FCC. Other nearby cities have maintained the same prohibition or location preferences which are allowed. Wireless carriers are required to show that an exception to their municipal code is necessary for them to provide service, or they must appeal a decision based on the more restrictive municipal code language in those cities. What is a small wireless facility or small cell or low-powered cell, as Ms. Eisberg referred to? Maybe we should get those definitions if we're going to use those words. Small may be compared to the thousands of watts of power emitted by a cell site on Solano Avenue or San Pablo Avenue, but only 15 feet away from a bedroom window. 5G radiation will be millimeter wave radiation. That is 20 times the frequency now used by cell phones at around 800 to 2,000 megahertz. People on Nextdoor are asking what the truck parked at Safeway was doing. They were doing propagation studies for Verizon 5G at 39,000 megahertz. The long-term health effects of millimeter wave radiation on humans and other creatures like honeybees are unknown. The antiquated FCC standards are based only on thermal heating effects of microwave radiation. If it doesn't burn your skin, it must be safe, even if you will be exposed to it all the hours you are in your home or your school or your business. More and more studies are proving this is false. I urge you to maintain the prohibition on wireless facilities in the public right-of-way adjacent to or in residential districts. You should ask staff to look at other cities' codes and return with more restrictive language. Just because AT&T asserts something doesn't make it true. A lot of this is subject to legal interpretation. We have 2 fiber optic cables on the poles in front of our homes from 2 different carriers. We can have internet and Wi-Fi if we want it as fast as we like. We don't need this in front of our homes. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's add that to the list of those comments, to the list of things that we'll take up and consider. Are there any other public comments on this item? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion, if anyone is inclined to make one, to continue this item to the next meeting.
Do we need a motion?
Do we need a motion?
It's up to you. You could do it by consensus if you want.
Is
I think
it?
a motion's probably cleaner for the record.
I kind of prefer that.
Okay, then I'll move that we continue the discussion of ordinance 2019-08 to our next meeting.
I'll second.
Councilmember Moss?
Yes.
Councilmember Pilch?
Yes.
Vice Mayor McQuaid?
Yes.
Mayor Nason?
Yes. So we move on to unfinished business. Item 11-1, final plans for Phase 4 of the Lower Cornices Creek Restoration Project. May we have a staff report, please?
Good evening. The resolution before you tonight accepts the final plans of Phase 4 of the Cornices Creek Restoration Project. The planning and implementation of the restoration of Lower Cornices Creek between Keynes Avenue and the freeway have been ongoing since the late 1990s, and these plans involve the City of Albany, the City of Berkeley, and the University of California all working together. The original master plan was prepared in 2001, and 3 phases of the restoration project have been completed to date from 8th Street downstream to the railroad tracks. Phases 4 and 5 of the creek project address the remaining unrestored sections of the creek from San Pablo Avenue to 8th Street. And Phase 4 includes a multi-use path from 8th to 10th Streets, a crossing at 8th Street to link the Phase 3 project, and minor vegetation improvements. This path is designed to improve pedestrian and ADA access rather as a bike trail. The portion of the trail adjacent to the ball fields will be crowded during game times, and there will be signage requiring cyclists to take alternate routes or walk bicycles during those times. This project is partially funded through the current approved CIP through Measure R open space funds. And upon acceptance of the plan, staff will seek grant opportunities for the unfunded portion of the project. Staff has been working with the landscape architecture design consulting firm Restoration Design Group, or RDG, to conduct stakeholder engagement and to design the project. And tonight, RDG Representative Annika Swinehart is here to give a presentation on the plans and answer any questions. So I'll turn it over to her. Yeah.
And is there a mouse or a pointer? Okay. It's an honor to be here and present to you. I haven't had the honor of being at a city council meeting before. I've been with the Public Space, Recreation, Open Space Committee, so thank you for listening. The Cordonices Creek Restoration Project has been ongoing for a long time. What you see in front of you is a highlight of the area that we're talking about tonight, Phase 4. And as Claire mentioned, no, it doesn't show the mouse, does it? It's the 4th installment. 3 have already been done, and the 5th is coming up, but it's part of a much larger game plan that's changed a lot as time has gone on. As you can see in this picture, initially the baseball fields were going to move north, and there was going to be a lot more room for both the trail and the creek and the baseball fields in the original conception for the Cordonices Creek Restoration Plan. As it stands now, all 3 of those are still occupying the same stretch of land. So our job has been to try and come up with the best result for the most number of factors there. I'll go to this one. So, as I mentioned, the existing conditions, the ball fields are staying where they are. The box culvert that carries Cordonices Creek underneath 8th Street is staying where it is. And the connection to Phase 3 is staying where it is, which is slightly offset from where we can connect to a trail on the other side of 8th Street. So there's some constraints on that. In the future conditions at the other end of the trail that we're doing right now, at 10th Street, there's going to be some overlap there between Phase 4 and Phase 5, because there is an opportunity to daylight Cordonices Creek across 10th Street. And I'll show a slide explaining that. The plans for CC4 have been presented at the 60% stage, the 75% stage, and the 90% stage to various agencies and committees, and this is now the 100% stage review. The City of Berkeley Transportation and Traffic Engineering has looked at it. Stormwater, University of California, Berkeley Maintenance and Ground Department have reviewed and given comments, as have their planning department. And the City of Albany has worked very hard reviewing these plans all the way along. And we've gotten feedback from community groups. Albany Strollers and Rollers has been very active in advocating for sensible bike connections, and thinking about the human use for this trail. And the Friends of Five Creeks have been wonderful advocates for helping get this going forward and doing what's best for the creek under constrained conditions. AC Transit has also reviewed the plans, and Little League. So there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen. Existing conditions, in case you haven't been out to 8th Street lately, this is what we have right now. And as you can see, the pavement is not in great shape. Currently, all of the drainage, the stormwater runoff, goes directly into the creek, into that box culvert. And as recently happened with a firefighting effort, anything that gets dumped into the street goes into the creek right now. And part of this project is also to have stormwater that's hitting our roads get filtered before it enters our creeks. And this is some of the trail conditions. You can see, sort of looking back towards 8th is the picture on the left, and on the right is the trail as it exists between the chain link fences at the ball fields. And this is at 10th Street, which is sort of a mishmash at current. There's been some restoration done on the Berkeley side where their bioretention has come down, and it's currently closed to traffic between those yellow bollards. But there's a lot of grading issues and a mismatch of materials, and there isn't a good way to get from 10th Street behind the fields back over to 8th Street. And in terms of addressing the future conditions at 10th Street, Phase 5 will be daylighting Cordonices Creek across that stretch. And what's highlighted in blue here is the box culvert that's underground, and that would be coming out. And the sort of squiggly, wavy green line on this plan is where roughly the top of bank will be when that creek is laid back and opened up. And so even though it looks like there's a lot of space currently at the 10th Street end for paving or making a larger plaza, part of our job is to be fiscally conservative for you and not have you putting anything in now that's going to need to come out for the next phase of work on the creek. So that's just framework for all of the exciting stuff to come. And because I don't think this particular committee saw the 90% plan presentation, what's shown on the left is the 75% progress set and where we are now. And there's been a lot of comments in the meantime going between the two to get to where we are. On the 75% progress set, there's a highlighted distance. The road at 8th Street was initially kept at 24 feet clear, and the sidewalk was 10 feet wide, and concerns were expressed about the safety of mixing pedestrians and bikes from the CC3 side, which is that orange arrow at the bottom, coming over on such a narrow sidewalk. And in talking with the different traffic and transportation reviewers, what we came up with was a way to both restrict where people can cross by extending the bioretention and capturing all the stormwater and sort of really pulling people across that level speed table. You avoid kind of a wandering mishmash at 8th Street. There's a very clear, legible framework for both pedestrians and bicyclists. And by narrowing the road, which AC Transit approved, it makes a crossing area much more visible to cars as well. You have to slow down to go through there. And we expanded the sidewalk to 12 feet wide. So you've got a much more generous sidewalk space and a much more controlled access point for that crossing zone in the current set. Another concern was the 90-degree turn at the north end of the sidewalk. And there's nowhere really to go on the north side except into the road. There isn't a sidewalk directly north of there, and there's a driveway to the left. So what we're showing in our plans now is what was recommended by the transportation engineers and the city, so that if a bike does come onto the sidewalk and changes their mind, they don't have to hop the curb or do anything dangerous as a way down. And if someone with visual impairments is on the sidewalk and heads north, they're still given a warning that they're entering into a traffic lane. We softened the curve up a great deal from the 75 to the 100% set, while maintaining basically a 90-degree angle. We do want people to slow down. We don't want people to be moving at speed from the sidewalk onto that trail. But it still makes it safer and more comfortable for the bicyclists when they're doing it. And it is a 10-foot wide trail. Currently, the trail is about 3 to 4. So it's a much more generous and comfortable space to move through. We pulled the fence back as well to make room for that. This is the middle section of the trail, and the yellow circles on the left-hand side of the plan highlight areas that were of concern, both for comfort and for safety, and to make sure that we had enough shoulders. Again, this is not a Class 1 bike trail. This is a paved ADA access for the ball fields and to connect 10th to 8th in a much safer, open, and more pleasant way for as many users as possible. There's also an orchard out there, the Richard Register designed fruit orchard, and the trees that are shown on this plan are the existing trees that we're trying to protect. So the rocks that are around that existing tree are there to kind of act as bollards, basically, to these trees. There have been some comments about having those rocks as close to the trail as they are. And we can remove them, but it would be at the risk to the tree. So that's a decision the city can look at if that's a comment that you want to move forward with. But in the effort to save as many trees as possible and keep those in place, those boulders were put there basically to bollardize them a little bit against running children and bikes and everything else. But again, on the 75% set, there was a 90-degree angle there. The asphalt paving is on the left, and it comes into a square change in material, and that was to signal that you are entering a different use zone. So you're coming off the asphalt, much more creek area, and now you're entering the ball fields. And so it looks like a sidewalk, it feels like a sidewalk, it reads like a sidewalk, and hopefully all users will exhibit the manners of a sidewalk. But the 90-degree angle was of concern, and so if you look on the 100% side in the green circle, we put in a radius and we pulled the asphalt down to a much cleaner edge, and we pulled it away from the existing concrete pad that was there to give more room and less tightness at that edge while still protecting the existing tree. And the fence was pulled back and pulled farther away from the sidewalk. And we removed the logs that we had put there for seating to give more space and comfort to the trail. And over on the right-hand side, there's 3 logs that are circled in orange from the 75% set. Those seating logs, the informal seating logs, were pulled 2 feet away from the trail to give a standard 2-foot shoulder there and room for your feet to sit down, and we removed the boulder in between them because of those concerns as well. And the other thing I want to point out that is not circled is a change in our strategy on the demolition in this area as an effort to try and keep costs down and to reduce adjacencies that were of a safety concern. And those were brought up in between the 90% and the 100% set. So on the left-hand side, this is where I wish I had a laser pointer. At the limit of work line, you'll see a white, does anyone, I can just use my pen. I can talk loud. In the first plan, we removed this concrete pad and kept this and poured the sidewalk right up against the trail. And in reviewing that layout and the concerns about safety and adjacencies, we ended up leaving this pad, which is newer, 4 inches thick and sturdier, and just saw cutting it to leave a solid concrete base for the bleachers and removing the broken concrete to remove a dangerous adjacency to the trail. So we actually are removing less concrete and providing a safer adjacency and more of a uniform shoulder to the trail again. And these are just pictures to illustrate that particular condition. On the left is the newer concrete pad under the bleachers that was poking into the space that's left for the trail. And on the right, you can see the condition of the other concrete pad, which is broken and uneven and rough enough that pouring a trail up against it would cause a tripping hazard, basically. So we're keeping the good one, trimming it, and taking out the one that's in poorer condition. And over at 10th Street, on the 75% set, concerns were aired about having the fence right up against the face of the trail, and we pulled it back and have run it flush from that end all the way along to provide a kind of uniform planting area between the trail and the fence. Bike parking is always at a premium, and we wanted to fit in as much as we could. But there was concerns about where the bike parking was located and how it was oriented. So it's moved from adjacent to the bleachers down to sort of being in line with the planting area, and the bollards are being moved to protect that and create more of a protected space for those bikes. And we've included a bike space to the north of where the relocated bleachers, the ones you saw in this picture, These are going to be relocated down. So you have 4 bike racks, which isn't a ton more than 4, but it's still an additional bike rack. And the trash and recycling receptacles were moved away from the bioretention closer to the central gathering area by the bleachers. And one of the comments we received was about scooching those bleachers north, which can absolutely happen. All of the amenities in the plan have to be approved by the owner's representative, which is the City of Albany staff, prior to installation. So where those bike racks go and where the bleachers go precisely all have to be field verified before they're installed. And this is the speed table. And details of this level were not present in the 75% plan. And these were reviewed by both our civil engineer and all of the transportation departments and approved. And the part that's exciting about it is that by incorporating the bioretention and the trench drains, we're able to prevent all of the stormwater from this section from going directly into the creek. It'll all go through bioretention before it enters the box culvert, which should help protect your lovely creek. And that's just a lovely aerial view of Cordonisus Creek, Phase 4, and the lovely town of Albany. So we're at an exciting point. A lot of work has gone into finessing this to the best of everyone's abilities. And thank you for having us here. Any questions? I'm sure there are.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions from the council? Councilmember Moss?
Not at this point.
Okay. Councilmember Pilch?
Sure. So the trail goes between, at the eastern end, it goes between the ball field and the bleachers, is that it?
It does. And I don't have the demolition plans up here, but the fence that you're seeing on the left-hand side of that picture between the overgrown trees, that's all getting cleared. Mm-hmm. So all the non-native species and trees and rubble is getting cleared out of there, and that fence is coming out. Okay. The ball fence is staying, but everything else is shifting. And the bleachers that you see at the end are going to come out and be on 10th Street, and that's where the connection will be coming through. The trail will basically be where those bleachers are.
And what is the purpose of putting the trail between the ball fields and the bleachers rather than behind the bleachers or adjacent to the bleachers? In other words, the trail goes to, instead of the trail being on the west side, why would you not put the trail on the east side of the bleachers?
The east side of the bleachers.
Let's see. Maybe I'm not reading it right, but let me just get up for 1 second and point.
Oh, it's fine. Go.
Yeah. Pointer. Yay.
Pointer.
Yay. So the trail is
right
heading up that way.
Correct.
Yes.
Because this connects to an existing sidewalk that's been put in by the city of Berkeley, and this is an existing trail.
Okay, so.
And this is the existing trail, and so this is a continuation of a sidewalk that already exists, and so it's a natural extension of that sidewalk.
And there's no outlet here.
This trail comes out, and this is between these bollards and these bollards. There's no traffic. This is sort of a plaza that will then be developed further in Phase 5 to connect to this. There'll be a pedestrian bridge going over the Daylit Creek, connecting to this plaza area.
So I see. So people can proceed either this way or that way.
Correct. They can come down and enter. They can enter this way and head out, or they can head back up onto the sidewalk.
Okay, thank you for that.
No problem.
And
I have a pointer.
There was some comment by the public about plantings very close to the path, to the trail. I wondered if you wanted to comment on that.
Yeah, the current planting plan, there is no plant with an edge within a foot of the trail. There's a 1 foot mulch shoulder along every edge. The plants that are planted, their centers are off of that, are Iris douglassiana and Carex, which are not super invasive or large, and they're used often as edging, but they're still native to the creek environment. I think that the plants that were of issue were the Carpentaria, and we selected those for their columnar shape and for screening and floral interest. And the fences are very open, and the center of that plant is still 3 feet off the trail, and it has room to grow south. We can take the Carpentaria out if that's needed, but they were selected for their columnar shape and the fact that they're doing really well with very little irrigation along stretches of the creek as well, and still providing pollinator habitat and something to look at. The concern is that if you have a complete ground cover area and then a split rail fence, people are going to stand in it and trample it, but if you have a few plants of interest, it becomes its own space. And we're not worried about it being a safety hazard in any way, so.
Thank you. That's it for my questions at this
Vice
time.
Mayor McQuaid, do you have any questions? Okay, then let's go to public comment. Do we have, how many speaker cards do we have?
4.
4, okay. Let's go ahead with 3-minute comments.
Susan Schwartz, Ian McLeod, Preston Jordan. I'm sorry, just 3.
Thank you.
Thank you. Still Susan Schwartz, head of Friends of Five Creeks. We want to express our gratitude to the City of Albany, to RDG for all the time it has taken to coordinate with everyone on this plan. We very much hope that it will go ahead soon. And rather than talk about the details, I'd like to go way up in the sky and think about how fortunate Albany is that you have Cerrito Creek, which effectively has a creekside trail longer than practically any other city in this area, that you will now have Codornices Creek with a very long creekside trail. The value of this that people talk about for people's health, for nature in the city, for peace, for recreation. You are going to have more apartments and condos on San Pablo and elsewhere. People need this. As Gilman is improved, this will become an alternative transportation corridor. You are very fortunate for such a small city in these very rich areas, taking really very little space, and we will see to it very little maintenance money. And I congratulate you all.
Thank you. Mr. Jordan?
Good evening, council, staff. It's been an exciting process, and I also want to thank the designers for making so many adjustments. Some of them were very fine, but I think will make a difference to some of the users. I do have a comment, an opportunity, and a couple of questions. I noticed in the staff report that the engineer's estimate came in higher, not surprisingly, than the money's available. I did notice that the parking lot that's at the west end, the inner curbs have currently been demolished. It's apparently being used as a laydown area for a temporary natural gas supply system. I presume PG&E is working on the natural gas supply pipes. And so one of the elements of this project was to demolish those curbs inside the parking lot and then reconfigure them in a different fashion to make more space. So I don't know if UC Berkeley is planning on rebuilding those curbs, but if they are, it would make sense to rebuild them under the new configuration rather than the old, and that could save some money if they're going to do it anyway. A couple of questions. The area that isn't paved around the ball fields, if my understanding is correct from the plans, is shown as a Class 2 AB aggregate. That can have up to over 40% by weight stones that are 3/4 of an inch or slightly larger in dimension, which is pretty coarse to walk on. There's enough fines that when it is initially compacted, it might seem like a good surface, but over time, as those fines potentially erode off, you're going to be left with a very coarse surface left. So if you think of the shoulders of, say, the multi-use path through the Ohlone Greenway, the material that's on those shoulders is nowhere near that size. So I would recommend asking if that is the case, if that's still what's specified, why that is specified, if something finer could be specified, at least as a top lift of an inch or so. I guess I should also say I'm on the Traffic and Safety Commission, although I'm speaking on my own behalf, although some of these comments did come up there. Another item that came up and has actually been an ongoing concern is that the truncated dome mats are extraordinarily slippery, the standard, the kind that's used in Albany when they're wet. I've anecdotally actually seen people slip on them in San Francisco on the same material. There's been a number of people who have talked about crashing on their bikes because these are also installed along bikeways. And so the Traffic and Safety Commission suggested that this should be a higher friction product, of which there are higher friction products available. I don't see that specification in there. It's particularly relevant to the crossing at 8th Street because that crossing on the east side is going to require people who are riding their bikes to make a 90-degree turn or some matter of turn as they cross that mat, which is a recipe for crashes. So if you could please pay attention and ask those two questions, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McLeod?
Do you have the landscape plans? Is it possible to see those? You have the, that's not the landscape plan that's part of the package, unfortunately. Ian McLeod, Planning and Zoning Commission here on my own behalf. Good evening. I would like to say this is great. I do love this plan, that it's going forward and all that, but I do have some concerns about some areas. And specifically, if you do look at this 100% plan where the fence, if I can point it out, the fence was moved back, and a lot of the concern was that there were going to be a lot of people, a lot of kids, a lot of bicyclists. And that was requested to create a little bit of a buffer zone, but if you look at the landscape plants, it's not just small plants, it's like box, 5-gallon plants, a whole bunch of other plants in there that basically are going to fill up that whole space and probably grow into the pathway. And that's true in 2 areas near the ball fields. And I think they should be removed, put behind the fences. When I look at this plan, I'm an architect, I think, in terms of circulation space, and I just see a lot of stuff that's in the way of the circulation space. I would remove the concrete benches. I would pull a lot of the logs back or out of there. You want to provide overflow space for the kids, parents, coaches. And then on the other end of this path, you have the soccer ball fields and the softball field. And one of the goals, at least in my mind, for this path was to provide a safe way for kids and families to go from Dartmouth along this path all the way down to the other soccer fields and ball fields. And you have maybe 1,000 kids down there on a Saturday and on a Sunday. So, if we're planning for success, we need to provide more space for all these people to circulate, to move through this path. And I really don't like, how do I go to the, let's see, go to the next page. Yeah, that one right there. I really do not like the way this area is configured. You've got a flat area here. You should make this wider and more generous and allow people to turn in, left, right, in and out, people milling around, exiting safely if they're on foot, baseball players, kids, families. There's just a lot of stuff in the way. Pull the bleachers out of the way. Put the bikes on the north side, bike parking on the north side. You're funneling everybody through here. I don't think this is an appropriate place for bicycles to go in front of bleachers. That seems like a huge mistake. I don't think you should allow bikes to go through there. I think they should go around on the street area. Basically it's make it more generous. You've got enough room to make a flat area later after the phase 5 is done. Phase 5 is maybe going to chew that area up anyway, but really think of it in terms of circulation space, moving people through there safely, kids and bikes going to the other soccer fields. We have to plan for success, and that's that this will be used a lot, so make it more generous.
Thank you
very much.
Mr. Parsley?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Brian Parsley, Albany resident. I guess I'm going to be the lone naysayer here tonight. I have worked for the University of California Police Department for 27 years. 12 of those were in the University Village. I'm speaking on behalf of myself, not the department or the University of California. Plans like this are great. They're fun to look at. The reality is myself, my coworkers have to deal with the real world. And these plans don't talk about the real world. They don't show the homeless encampments, which the city of Berkeley will refuse to clean up on their side of the creek. It will not show the overgrown willows that were planted that are horrible on the west end. It does not show the creek path, which all these wonderful children are going to go to, which is a mud pit in the winter. Plans like this are great. The reality is, unless there is a significant plan that all 3 cities, or 2 cities and 1 university are involved in, it is not going to work. That has been the history of this project. I first became involved in this project as the president of the Albany Children's Center Parents Council when my child was in preschool. My child is a 9th grader at Albany High now. So it has been over 12 years since this project was started. And it has not worked at all in that whole time. It's wonderful to think about this. It would have been wonderful if it did, but it didn't. And that's because nobody can get on the same page with one another. The university can't get on the same page with Albany. Albany can't get on the same page with Berkeley. Half of this stuff isn't going to work because where the Bollards are talking about going, there's a loading dock for Belmont Village. I mean, some of this stuff just doesn't work. Now, unless all 3 municipalities get on board with one another, it is going to be an utter failure that it is in the West End. If you haven't been down there, go take a look. Everybody loves to go to the Bulb. Go walk down there at 8 o'clock at night on that West End. And you tell me if this project is working. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Would staff and the consultant like to address any of the public comments before we take it back to council?
Would you like us to?
It would be nice, yeah.
Sure, yeah.
I think I took good enough notes here. I'll respond to Preston first because we did adjust the plans for those issues. Our civil engineer reviewed the Class AB size that we had in the specs, and we've changed the spec to have it be a 3/4 inch max size diameter. And he was fine with that, and we checked in with 2 other projects that have used it on a finer sieve and with smaller sizes, and it'll still give you the durability, but it's got a much smaller parameter on what's allowed for the project. So that 3/4 inch will be the maximum size allowed for the surfacing of that. Cost is an issue, and DG is mobile, and we didn't want to have that near the creek because this is a restoration project. So that was our compromise, to reduce the size of the AB that's allowed on the project. And the UC parking lot has been demolished. That has been removed from the plans. And it's actually kind of an amazing opportunity because our plans will then dictate what they get to do. They'll have to meet our edge requirement. And the parking lot as designed for the project works for their loading requirements and their turning radiuses and their delivery trucks and their needs. And they have those plans. They were referred to. They were part of the design process for that. So, if they want to put it back as designed by this project, they can. But our turning radius and our outside edge of that will be their new edge. So the space, we're not going to lose any space. And the costs were already taken out for that parking lot. Unfortunately, they're gone. We took them out. And the other one was UC parking lot, Class A, B. The truncated dome mats, we did confer with Albany and Berkeley, and the spec for the truncated domes is a higher friction mat. And so that was changed in the specification package for a higher friction, higher grit surfacing. In terms of the planting and the circulation, part of why we're not, clicker, here we go. The question about the planting and the concern about homeless encampments and visibility into the creek and safety are kind of tightly coupled here. Am I doing it right? There we go. Get low. So this is the top of bank right here, and it's a fairly steep section. The reason that these log seating areas are here is to create a bit of a barrier from people just running straight down in and out, and to provide some informal seating near the edge. There's some native plants in here that we're trying to keep. This is all being cleared. It is not being planted. It's being mulched, and they're going to be doing weed suppression. But we're not planting any new material down there. There's no willows going in. It's non-native removal and weed suppression, pretty much all the way through here. We're just cleaning out and actually making it more visible. Part of this project will be making better sight lines into the creek rather than its current condition now, which is really, really overgrown with a chain link fence, creating a very private, enclosed, creepy situation. So this will all be opened up for that. And this is just to keep people from running willy-nilly. And planting on this side of the fence would keep this more open, but it would, again, it's the plants that are in here are low except for the carpenteria. We can take the carpenteria out, but the idea is that the rail fences here is to keep people away from this steep edge and to keep people from going down into the creek. If you're coming on a bike and you fall, or if kids are running around and throwing things, we don't want them ending up in the creek. And that was a safety concern, and that's why the fence is where it is. So it's a little bit of both. It is a very tight, it is a very constrained condition. We can't do any work or excavation within the top of bank without triggering federal permits. So we're not doing it. The ball fields aren't moving. So we've got this much space to give everyone what they want. Safety, a clear path, a good shoulder, a place for their bleachers, and a ball field. We can change the planting to reduce the height if that will feel better, but having this just be DG, I don't think is going to feel any different than having this be a soft edge. And again, we're trying to protect the orchard that's here, so you're coming out of a more domesticated area, and then you're in here, and this is a barrier to keep people, it's a safety barrier in a very tight, in a very constrained condition. So, but we can lower the height of the planting if the city would like to do that. Do you have anything you wanted to add about this?
Just one other point about the three agencies working together. I think you're familiar with the fact that for several years there was a time when the agencies weren't meeting regularly, but for the past year the agencies have worked very well together. The City of Albany, the City of Berkeley, and UC Berkeley, and we expect that working relationship to continue.
I have a question. Have you consulted with all of the relevant public safety authorities who will have responsibilities there regarding homelessness, crime, fires, anything untoward that could happen?
That's a great question. We consulted with UC Berkeley's planning folks who sometimes speak for public safety, but I'm not sure that they actually consulted with public safety directly.
It might be something that we want to do before we go to construction, because sometimes their perspectives can actually be surprising to the rest of us. Thank you. Yeah. Other questions or comments? So we'll bring it back to council.
Sure. I also want to thank the advocates and the city and the planners for these plans. Looks pretty darn good to me, given the constraints. Appreciate that a coarser material was chosen for the truncated domes. That's been an issue for me for some time, and I gave samples of coarser material to our Public Works Director to show him what that looks like. Not that he might have already known, but it's good to know that that material is out there. I think we ought to take, as the project takes shape, let's continue to review it and look at the plantings as they go in, and if they don't make sense, well, let's maybe not put them in or relocate them as the project goes in, if it does seem like it's making things too constrained. And it's hard for me to exactly see how the East End is going to be, but I think we should also be aware as we implement whether or not there's sufficient room there for circulation, and if not, maybe we ought to consider at least adjustments into Phase 5 or adjustments into the current implementation. But otherwise, thanks everyone.
Thank you. Vice Mayor McQuaid?
No, I don't really have anything to add. I sort of followed this via YouTube from the various commissions that have reviewed it. I think you've done a great job in bringing all the pieces together, so thank you. Thank you to staff. And I think it's time to move it forward.
Councilmember Moss?
Yeah, I appreciate how complicated this was on the level of so many things that you're having to balance and all the space considerations, et cetera. And a couple of things struck me when I was looking at these plans. I think number one is I hate looking at plans on an iPad. But, besides that, I don't think everybody that's going to be using this is going to have 100% of what they want. There had to be compromises here. This is not going to be an ideal bike path. It may not be an ideal walking path. It may not be the best way to observe or participate in the natural environment. It may not be the best way to pack kids in there to watch a baseball game. But, it's not going to make everybody 100% happy, but I think you've hit something that's going to work for the most part for everyone. It does occur to me that a lot of what's here is landscaping, and as this is done and evolves, landscaping can be changed, as I've seen multiple times in our backyard. If it doesn't work, it gets yanked out and something else can go in. So there's a certain degree of flexibility. My only other comment was looking at the budget for this, and this is nothing that came up tonight. It's a lot of money. I know we're going to get grant money to be doing this for the most part, or hopefully for the most part. But there are a number of things in that budget. When I look at it, $41,000 for traffic control. I'm having a hard time planning my mind around how much traffic you're going to close off some streets, and that's going to cost $41,000. There were several other things that seemed to me just seemed kind of high. But I was in construction, and I'm better able to look at a construction project and get a sense of it than I am a landscaping project, and this is sort of a landscaping project. So I will, hopefully, costs will maybe come down a little bit once you get going on this whole project. But otherwise, I'm happy to vote for it tonight and go on to that next level of finding the funding to see what we can do.
All right. I'd like to echo the rest of the council's appreciation for the hard work that's gone in here. It is difficult to evaluate all these trade-offs, but I think that both the process and the product have been admirable. I think that you've listened to the community, and a lot of changes have been made in response to comments. And I think I'm also very much prepared to support this. I would ask that although we will have, if we vote tonight to approve it, we will have an approved plan. I would ask that the public safety folks be consulted and make sure that they're going to be comfortable with what's going in on the ground, because they have such serious responsibilities to fulfill, protecting children in an area that is also a natural area with a lot of hiding places and so forth. So I would be glad to entertain a motion if anybody is interested in making one.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, I was going to say, I'll move we adopt Resolution 2019-86 with the caveat that the public safety entities from all three agencies are consulted in accepting Phase 4 plans for the Lower Cordonices Creek Restoration Project, and authorize staff to identify funding for construction.
I'll second.
Councilmember Moss,
Yes.
Councilmember Pelch.
Yes.
Vice Mayor McQuaid.
Yes.
Mayor Nason.
Yes,
Motion carries.
we have a plan. So moving on, we are now up to new business, and we are going to now consider request by the Social and Economic Justice Commission to amend the 2019 to 2021 work plan and to increase the commission membership. May we have a staff report, please?
Yes, good evening. I'll be brief because we do have the chair of the SEJC here tonight, Bart Grossman, ready to make a presentation to council. But basically, the Social and Economic Justice Commission is requesting an amendment to the SEJC 2019-2021 work plan to include the planning and implementation of a housing forum to address housing issues in Albany, and also to increase the Commission's membership of 2 at-large members. The staff recommendation at this time is that the council provides staff with direction regarding the recommendation from the Social and Economic Justice Commission. If council approve the SEJC work plan amendment to include the implementation and organization of the forum, staff recommends that the council direct the SEJC to identify the exact scope of the forum and direct staff to identify the associated budget based on the scope of the event. And if council authorizes an increase to the Social and Economic Justice Commission membership, staff would prepare a resolution based on specific council direction for the next council meeting. So I think at this point, I'll turn it over to the chair of the commission for a presentation.
Good evening, council members. My name is Bart Grossman. I'm a longtime Albany resident and the current chair of Social and Economic Justice. And I want to thank you for taking the time this evening to review our 2 requests. 3 members of the commission are present in addition to myself: Judy Kerr, Margie Marks, and Brian Parsley. The Social and Economic Justice Commission was established in 2005 with a composition of 7 members. In 2010, council discontinued the appointment of 2 Albany Unified School District Board of Education members, reducing the membership to 5. The charge of this commission is to research, analyze, discuss, and evaluate a broad range of data and opinions on social and environmental issues affecting the welfare of the residents of Albany as inhabitants of both the local and global community, and make recommendations to the council on positions, policies, and other actions to address these issues. In years past, the breadth of the commission's charge created some confusion. But I think in recent years, the work plan process has clarified the role of the Commission, and I believe the Commission has rendered important service in reviewing and evaluating Albany Project Hope, reviewing progress toward housing element policies with community development staff, proposing and providing input on the rent review program ordinance, providing recommendations to council on the sugar-sweetened beverage tax and on health and wellness programs to develop with tax revenue, providing input on outreach efforts regarding information on low-income senior tax exemptions, and proposing and implementing and evaluating a drop-in resource center pilot program, which is evolved into the Albany Cares program. In accordance with our current work plan, in addition to our ongoing program functions, the Council is actively working on preparing recommendations on aging-in-place policies and programs, developing recommendations on enhancing diversity and inclusivity in the functions of the city, and promoting housing availability and quality, a subject I'll return to in a minute. We have two requests for your consideration. One, we ask the Council to amend our work plan to include development of recommendations for an Albany Housing Forum to be held in the spring of 2020. And two, we ask Council to return the composition of the committee to 7 members with the inclusion of 2 at-large members. With regard to the Housing Forum, our current work plan includes the objective to review all new multifamily housing proposals for affordability needs of the community and to investigate funding sources and state and regional housing initiatives to increase affordable housing in the Bay Area and the implications for Albany. We've been working on mechanisms to implement this objective, and it's increasingly obvious that many new plans and proposals are being developed at the state and regional level by governmental and quasi-governmental organizations, many of which will have significant implications for Albany. We believe that a housing forum to be held in the spring of 2020, perhaps in conjunction with Alameda County's Affordable Housing Week, would allow us all to learn more about what is going on, what the effects might be, and how they will impact various populations with the Albany community. We see this as an opportunity for residents to hear from experts in the field and discuss their hopes for the future of our city. We believe this approach will better prepare Albany to respond proactively and reactively to changes in housing policy with an understanding of the impact on all segments of the community. We're contemplating a half-day program to be held in a city venue. We've not yet developed a budget, but we expect the cost to be low. We recognize that other commissions such as Planning and Zoning, Transportation, Economic Development, and Climate Action have interests in this arena, and we would invite them to send representatives to a planning committee for this event. We're not asking you to approve the event at this time, but simply to allow us to plan and to send specific recommendations to you at a later date. Shall I go on with the second?
Please.
Increasing the size of the commission. Since our charge is to research, analyze, discuss, and evaluate a broad range of data and opinions on social and environmental issues affecting the welfare of residents in Albany, many of our objectives take considerable time and effort. We often need to search for appropriate resources, access information from local and national experts, and seek resident input. With a 5-member commission allowing only 2-member subcommittees, we're significantly hampered in making progress on these objectives. In fact, our current work on housing is only possible because Judy Kerr has generously agreed to serve on 2 subcommittees. But we can't expect that everyone's going to be able to do this, and we feel we need larger subgroups to get the work done in a timely fashion. A larger commission would allow council to include a broader representation of our diversifying community. We mentioned the possibility of including a student because we've had successful experience along these lines, and we believe the voice of youth needs to be more prominent in our community. We know that there are diverse ethnic, racial, gender identity, religious, and other communities that should be better represented. And we think increasing the size of the commission will allow council to pursue representation from underrepresented groups. As the commission was originally envisioned to be a 7-person group, We hope you will see the wisdom in returning it to its original size so that it can be more helpful to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions from the council for Mr. Grossman?
Not at this point. No.
I have a process question, I guess. Are these two separate items, so it could be yes to one, no to one, yes to the other, no to the other? Okay.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much. Do we have speaker cards?
Yes. Preston? Preston?
Good evening again, Council. While I appreciate the need for the body to be a larger size, in 2010, the previous council removed many of the council as a whole, or otherwise known as at-large appointees, from many bodies. That's because rather than enhance representation of diverse opinions, those appointees can sometimes lead to a supermajority on the body. So because 3 members of the council can appoint both of those seats, you can end up with 5 people with 1 perspective on a body and 2 on another. And so it tends to magnify the majority's opinion on the council and distort it relative to what the electorate has asked for and has voted for. And in a few cases that led to, I would say, exacerbated conflict on committees. It led to the supermajority paying much less attention to the minority group's opinion. I'd also posit, while it's an idea that having 2 more members could increase diversity, I don't see any way to actually make that fact in terms of regulation of how those people would be appointed. In other words, the majority of the council would be able to appoint whoever it wants. If the council does want to increase the size of the body, I would suggest going back to having 2 school board appointees, because that would bring some diversity without magnifying the majority on this body. Or it could be possible to increase it to a 10-member body with 2 appointees per council member. But I ask you not to go backwards to the era when we had council as a whole appointees. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, Council. I've submitted my comments to you, and they're in the back in the binder, so I won't reiterate those. But I primarily just wanted to thank all of the council members for their participation in regional efforts and meetings that exist that take up your time, and I appreciate that you've done that. Particularly, I'd like to acknowledge Mayor Nason and Vice Mayor McQuaid's participation in regional housing planning efforts, including the, the Alameda County Mayor's Conference and Everyone Home programs. I am the person who is on 2 subcommittees, and I'm here to tell you that if I call in sick, nothing's going to happen. So I really would like to encourage you both to support the plan. We really would like to assist the efforts that you have all undertaken in terms of fostering and engendering a useful community conversation about housing in our community. We have a long history of redlining, we have a history of discriminatory practices, and we have a chance to make it right. And we want, as a commission, to work toward that with you and with our regional planners. So that's the purpose of our objective. And I'd also like to support 2 more members, or as Mr. Jordan suggested, perhaps 10. I mean, why not? So, thank you.
Susan Renault, Albany resident. I'm very interested in working on housing for the city of Albany. I work with Albany Cares and the shower program, and I'm very aware of the need of very low income housing. And I think that this is a beginning to move on. You've already made a start, but we need more. So, and I very much support diversity among staff and council members here in Albany. And I think having younger people, a student would be great, but other younger people of different backgrounds and races and experiences other than just older homeowners and people who have been in the system for a very long time and may have more patience with how long things take here than a younger person would. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Alan Harris, Albany resident, and a member of Diverse Housing Working Group, and a volunteer at the CARES table at the Senior Center. First of all, I want to thank you for the efforts you've made so far to meet our housing elements. We have a plan in progress with SAHA, and that's a good start. But I really think we need this housing forum to develop more opportunities to meet our housing goals of our housing element, and particularly the need for very low and low-income housing. The project that SAHA is preparing for Cleveland and Washington will meet part of that need. They still haven't figured out how many very low and low-income housing units they can provide. So the more opportunities we have, I think, the better. And we have opportunities along San Pablo. We have some unreinforced concrete buildings that could be improved, and adding retail, and the combination retail and housing is a great opportunity for that in meeting our general plan housing element. So I'm very much in favor of having this housing forum to get the word out of the needs and to get the opportunity to hear the community speak on this issue, hopefully supporting more housing and affordable housing in Albany. I also think that rent review is a very healthy opportunity for communication between landlords and renters. That doesn't always happen naturally. If a tenant, even if the rent doesn't go up more than 5%, there are a number of issues I think that can be covered about quality of the housing and opportunities for appropriate treatment of tenants can always be discussed there, and I think that's a very healthy opportunity to continue the Rent Review Board to address the needs of our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Parsley?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Brian Parsley, Albany resident and member of the Social and Economic Justice Commission. I had very deep thoughts about the adding 2 members, and then I got on the Aging in Place subcommittee. So I think it's a good idea. I do have some hesitancy with adding a student member or requiring a student member. In my past life on the Social and Economic Justice Commission, we had a very difficult time keeping a student member for more than several months. I know in the past there's been some great members, but I think requiring it to be a student member is somewhat problematic. Encouraging students to do it would be wonderful. I think having a at-large member and a member of the school board would be great, or 2 members of the school board if that makes people more comfortable. I don't see a downside to 7 members. There are many other boards that have 7 members. I would definitely see a downside to 10 members. So don't do 10 members. But I don't see a downside to 7. I don't see a downside to having more discussion, more thought, having a little bit more diversity, and maybe putting it on the commission to go out and try to find a little bit more diversity to join the commission. I think that putting it all on the council to appoint someone is a little bit much. Ultimately, it is your job, but we should do our part to get the message out to the community if that's something we want. So I would encourage you to really think about the ups and the downsides of it. I don't see a whole lot of downside to adding 2 more members. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Campbell, do you want to make a comment? Thank you.
Thank you. I find this an interesting conversation, but I have a question. I don't know what a housing forum would be or what it would do, and I wonder if we could just have a little bit of an explanation of what the makeup of that is or what it would do or just something about it.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments? Okay, then we'll bring it back to council. Who would like to kick this off?
Sure, I'll give it a go. Well, 2 different things here. As to adding 2 members, given the way that this committee has operated in terms of kind of doing these little subcommittees of 2 people working on this issue and 2 others working on this issue, this does make a certain amount of sense to me to expand it to 7 members, a little more energy, and you have such a broad portfolio of things that you've been looking at, you know, from soda taxes to housing to whatever. It makes sense, I think, to add some. I know it can be problematic about having high school students on, you know, keeping them interested in participating, but I also like the idea of getting more young people involved. I think that's, you know, one of my goals in my, you know, time I spend on council, and then, you know, and in the future will be how to figure out how to get, you know, kids interested and become active in what's going on in their cities. I can think of several ways we might do that. You know, perhaps if council is going to appoint, maybe we ask a group like Youth in Government to come up with a list of kids that they think might be appropriate for this committee, or the school board could do the same. I think that might be a way of kind of having another group kind of look at the potential kids out there and, you know, kind of get the list that they think is going to work. Not just whoever wants to apply can apply, because, you know, kids can be interested one week and not so interested somewhere down the line. Anyway, that would be my main comments on one way to look at adding 2 more. As for a housing forum, again, I like the idea of doing some kind of housing forum that is broadly based on informing people what is going on in housing, what's going on in state law, what's going on in Albany itself. We've done things like that before. Planning and zoning has done open forums to show spots where we could put in housing along San Pablo or Solano. I would think planning and zoning in particular would be a group that should be involved with something like that, because they're more up to date on exactly what the particular laws are. going on in the city and in the, on the state level. But also the Climate Action Plan, I can see that they would have a connection. I mean, all of our committees could. I think it would be fine if SEJC is sort of the center of kind of planning that, but I would like to see these other commissions and committees involved in it because they have 2 cents on that also. And you know, perhaps this is a one-shot event, maybe sometime in the spring that you guys could work on and, you know, get going as to kind of keep, because I think it is necessary to keep telling the members of the city that, hey, housing is still a need, and these are the ways that both the city and the state are pursuing this, and also review on what, you know, some of these other plans that are out there, the one, you know, the Bay Plan, what ABAG and MTC are thinking about, et cetera. So some kind of review like that, I think, would be beneficial to the city, would be beneficial to us. So I'm in favor of that.
Thank you. Vice Mayor McQuaid?
Just to start out with a slight correction, Affordable Housing Week, I believe, is done through EBHO, East Bay Housing Organizations, which is a nonprofit. It's not a county event. It's fine. It's just the way it is. You know, I have to sort of echo what Mr. Campbell asked as to what are we trying to accomplish here? At the end of the day, when everybody goes home, what have we accomplished? What have they learned? What was our goal for them to have learned? That goal, and I'm still not quite hearing that real clear to me. If we're going to do a forum, certainly we need to know what the cost is, and by cost, it's not the facility rental or the cookies or whatever we give out, but how much staff time is involved and what is that cost and what are they not doing as they're preparing for the forum? Or is it simply volunteer driven, which is great, but do we have the bandwidth to do that? I like the idea of the different advisory bodies joining together, and I'm wondering if they could join with DOG, or maybe with Everyone Home, or maybe with EBHO, and bring in nonprofits who have experience in this kind of thing, which would kind of take the pressure off SEJC. They're still maybe the lead group, but they're not doing all the heavy lifting. You know, and then again, I think planning and zoning certainly has a role in this. You know, I think Climate Action might want to step in. And I'm just sort of thinking out loud that maybe it's not, planning and zoning I think needs a formal role, but perhaps Climate Action could even be people that are interested in climate and maybe are working on a different level, not necessarily part of our commission, but interested in informed community members who want to participate in this. It may not have to be totally commission driven. So I think if we make the participation broader as far as the organizational piece, then I think that takes a lot of the pressure off of SEJC and makes me think that maybe it's not necessary at this time to expand their commission. I think for right now, that's what I have.
Thank you. Councilmember Pilch.
Thank you. Well, I have to say that the fact that you're running out of people to do great things is great. It's wonderful that, hate to put the kibosh on any efforts to volunteers who get together to try to do more good. And if you feel like adding 2 more members would be helpful, I'm amenable to that. I share Mr. Jordan's concerns with the appointment of members at large, and I think we could just very easily go back to the previous setup where we had the school board appoint two people, and we could suggest to the school board that one or more of those members be students. I myself had the pleasure of appointing two different students to SCJC, which was a wonderful experience, and I heard great feedback about both, so I certainly support that effort of getting at least one student on the committee. I don't think that there's going to be that much more administrative hassle to have those two extra members. So again, I'm in favor of that. As far as I want to take some of the comments of the vice mayor and use them perhaps for a different purpose. I think that she has it's a great idea to bring in more groups to this effort. The Diverse Housing Working Group, anyone else who cares or is working on housing in Albany, plus the nonprofits, and anyone else who you could bring in both to make your work easier in the forum and as people who might want to facilitate, and also to maybe attract more people to this forum. One of my very last sessions I went to at the League of California Cities was from the mayor of Walnut Creek, who had a wonderful presentation about what they're doing for housing, both affordable and market rate. One of the things she did was to give us a slideshow show us 10 apartment buildings and have us guess which ones were affordable, which ones were market rate, and which ones were both. And we pretty much got it all wrong, because if market rate buildings can look not so great and affordable projects can look beautiful, and everything in between. So that is a great sort of thing you could bring to a housing forum. I recommend trying to get in contact with her, actually. And to the staff, I need to tell you about the SB2 stuff that was spoken of in that forum as well. Don't let me forget that, Jeff. Anyway, getting back to the matter at hand, I think I'm very interested in having you work on such a forum. The devil is in the details. Do be very considerate about what you want to do and how you want to do it, and keep bringing this report back to us, because I certainly think something like this is good, is needed, but there's probably good ways to do it and better ways to do it, and I'd like the council to weigh in on that. So I guess I'm in favor of both requests that are on the table.
Could I ask a question? I'm sorry. How many, does the Board of Education have seats on our advisory bodies now? Are they all filled?
No.
They're not.
On SEJC in
No, on
particular, or on the
SEJC,
other?
there's
no.
No.
All of ours.
Yeah, there's
Arts Committee.
this is Climate Action, Arts Committee,
And CMAC.
and Park Rec and Open Space.
Yeah, so it looks like from what the mayor has, Climate has 2 seats, neither of which are filled at this time. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Climate Action has 2 seats from Board of Education. Are either of them filled?
I don't believe so. I have to check.
And it looks like Park and Open Space has 2 and they're filled. Arts has 1 and it's filled. Okay, I just wanted that.
Okay, thank you.
Currently, the Climate Action has the Board of Education vacant.
Only 1 vacant and 1 filled?
Well, 1 is City Council at Large. So it's 5 members, 1 Council at Large, and 1 Board of Education.
The Council at Large is a student.
Correct.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. I, like everyone else here, thinks that a housing forum would be terrific. I'm a little uncertain whether SEJC is the, I certainly don't think it should be the only. As other people have mentioned, it should be a partnership. the planning and zoning should be part of this planning, and nonprofit organizations, including SAHA, including our property owners association, the property providers. If it's a city event, it should be embracing and offering forums to all, to a wide range of points of view. If it's done privately, if it's done by diverse housing working group, it could be more of an advocacy type of forum, but if it's informational and broad-based, then different nonprofits with different perspectives should be invited. I'm supportive of that. However, in terms of increasing the number of the SEJC, I've given some thought to this, and it does seem like the purpose of the SEJC is to help first and foremost, to help the council get its work done. And one of the areas where I think that we are traditionally rather weak is in taking positions on broader efforts, particularly at the state level. There are a lot of issues that come up for people in Albany, and I count at least 5 that are very active concerns for everyone right now: housing, homelessness, climate change, plastic waste reduction, and water conservation and waste reduction. These are all things where we can seek out solutions at the local level, but we really need to take positions on broader efforts because it is only in the broader context that really meaningful change can be made. Our approach to legislation is typically generated from outside organizations. We're asked by the League of California Cities to take a position, or we're asked by Stop Waste, or we're asked by the East Bay Community Energy Group. And we don't have the time, we don't have the ability to do a great deal of analysis. And some of our positions have concerned me. For example, we, I think, unanimously voted to oppose SB 50, which was supported by both our state senator and our state assembly member. We really, and we followed the recommendation of the California League of Cities. That legislation will come back. And once again, I would expect that we would see our elected representatives in Sacramento supporting this. I think it's important that there be a meaningful discussion at the local level, but the city council is not the right place for that, because we have to make decisions about concrete local issues. So what I'd like the Social and Economic Justice Commission to consider as a change in its operations is to consider taking on recommendations for the council on a broader basis about what the city of Albany should and should not support in the way of larger efforts. And I think that it would give a forum for people who are interested in these issues to explore them in greater depth, and it would be truly helpful to the council to get recommendations that are formulated locally rather than by outside partners that may have very different interests and ideas from what people think locally. So, there are 2 ways to deal with too much work, and one is to have more workers because many hands make light work. But another way to deal with that is to refocus. And I think that refocusing the Social and Economic Justice Committee on what the council needs the most, and that is input on what, as a city, we should and should not be supporting in terms of larger efforts as well. And I'm not saying this would be a substitute, but that would be as well as concrete things that the council can do at the local level. When I look at the strategic plan goals, some of these, for example, Objective 3, items 2 and 3, these are diversity and inclusivity things that I think are now being dealt with at the council level. We have a subcommittee and are working on it. Aging in place, I really think that that might be better done through Friends of Albany Seniors or others who are very directly involved with large numbers of senior citizens. So there are things that are not as necessary, to my mind at least, to get from a committee like Social and Economic Justice. I also want to say this about participation in committees. When I was on the Waterfront Committee, I was not allowed to serve on the Homeless Task Force because you could only serve on one. But I went to every single Homeless Task Force meeting. I was extremely active. I made presentations. I came up with recommendations. I was as engaged, I think, as any other member of the Homeless Task Force, as any member, I should say, not other member, because I wasn't a member. But there's no reason that you can't pull people into worthy causes without, it doesn't have to be bureaucratic. It can be just inviting people in and offering them a role. It can be done, and I've done it. So I don't favor expanding the commission. I favor refocusing the commission, maybe rethinking it, taking some of the things off of the work plan, and adding something different, especially because of the emphasis on housing, because housing and homelessness are not issues that we can solve at the local level. We can make contributions, and we should do our share, but we need positions on things like SB 50 and other housing proposals that are coming at us at the regional and state level. So I think we're...
Shall we take maybe 2 votes then?
Let's take 2 votes. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. You want to take a whack at the housing forum motion?
Sure. I think that I will move that we approve the socially. I think you've gotten enough direction from us. So I'll move to approve the Social and Economic Justice Commission's request to amend the Commission's 2019 to 2021 work plan to include development of a plan for a new housing forum, et cetera, as stated in the staff report.
And I'll second that.
Councilmember Moss?
Yes.
Councilmember Pilch?
Yes.
Vice Mayor McQuaid?
Can I ask a question before I vote? Does your motion include bringing in the greater community to the forum? I'm sure that was part of the original plan, and I think that's our idea.
If the seconder is amenable, I will add, given council's, with council's direction to embrace a diverse suite of partners in the forum.
Right. I thought that was implicit in what you were saying the first time around, but thank you for the clarification. Yes, sure. I'm happy to second that.
Okay, and I'll say yes again.
May I ask for one more clarification? Does the council want a response from SEJC? As you see in the staff recommendation, it's that SEJC returns to you with a bit more substance in terms of intent and goals. Is that part of the motion as well? If you scroll down to the staff recommendation, item 1.
Yes. I didn't realize it wasn't part of the request, but yes, let's make that part of the motion. Absolutely, and that would be the under staff recommendation item 2 to include that as part of the motion.
Yeah. Okay. Again, seconded. So.
Can you repeat the motion now?
Okay.
I know we're partway through voting. But
All right, so I'm moving all of what's in the request in...
could you read the whole thing, please?
Oh, gosh.
If I may, Councilmember Pilch, I think if you did item 1 under the staff recommendation, it encompasses both, with the addition of adding a broader group of different agencies and interest groups.
Okay, you mean on item 2 under the staff recommendation?
No.
Maybe I'm looking at a different agenda. Item 1?
Item 1.
Approve the SCJC work plan amendment to include the implementation and organization of a housing forum. Staff recommends that council direct. Yes.
Let me refresh my browser. Maybe I have an old version of the staff report here, because the 1 and 2 are reversed from what you're saying.
Okay, so then on yours it is item 2. That's
Yeah. It is item 2 on mine. Okay, so okay, let's rewind. Start again. I move that we approve the an SCJC work plan amendment to include the implementation and organization of a housing forum, and that we direct SCJC to identify the exact scope of the forum and direct staff to identify associated budget and funding source for the forum for review by the council at a future meeting. We further direct SCJC to include a diverse selection of partners for this forum.
And again, seconded.
Okay. Let's start a vote again.
Councilmember Moss?
Yes.
Councilmember Pelch?
Yes.
Vice Mayor McQuaid?
Yes.
Mayor Nason?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, and then I will move that we authorize an increase to the Social and Economic Justice Commission membership to include 2 Board of Education appointed members with the emphasis with the direction to the Board of Education that at least 1 student appointee would be ideal.
I can second that.
Okay, Councilmember Moss?
Yes.
Councilmember Pilch?
Yes.
Vice Mayor McQuaid?
No.
Mayor Nason?
No.
Call Taiwan.
I believe a tie does not pass, correct?
Correct.
Motion fails.
Now, I don't ordinarily make motions as mayor, but I could, right?
You can.
There's no reason I can't do so. So
Our attorney's left, so you certainly can.
as long as Craig isn't here,
Anyway.
the cat's away, the mice can play. I'm going to move that that the council ask the Social and Economic Justice Commission to prepare an amendment to a proposed amendment to their work plan. Well, I'm going to say not that we direct them to prepare an amendment, but that they consider, they place on one of their agendas for discussion the possibility of reducing the scope of their work plan with respect to inclusivity and aging in place, and that they consider expanding the scope of the work plan to include developing recommendations on legislation, in particular on housing legislation that is introduced in the is introduced in the next session of the California legislature. Housing and homelessness, because those are related but not necessarily identical subjects.
Is that a motion?
That's a motion. It's a motion to give direction or direction to the Social and Economic Justice Commission to consider the possibility of amending their work plan in the manner specified.
Yeah, since I can second that, since it's a direction to consider.
I have a comment. I watch their meetings almost every month, and I know that they're working really hard on both aging in place and inclusivity. And I think at best it's disrespectful at this point to ask them to remove them. I do think they've worked hard on these, and I don't feel good about it.
It was a motion just to consider.
I understand that.
Yep.
Okay, Councilmember Moss?
You know, I like parts of this, but I don't like all of it. I'm going to vote no on this one.
Councilmember Pilch?
Yes.
Vice Mayor McQuay?
No.
Mayor Nason?
Yes, but
And the motion fails.
fails. Okay, then I think we are perhaps done for the evening. When it's not the right time. Right. And we go back to our agenda, and we still have the gift policy. This is item 12-2, and it is the update to donation acceptance policy.
Last item on the agenda here. This is the result of some August recess time where staff has an opportunity to look at things that need attention, and this is one of the policies that's rather dated. It's from 2004. It refers to a city administrator, and it's also rather general in nature. So what you see before you is our attempt in comparing it to other cities around the area to update this policy for some particular interests with regard to sizes of donations and also types of donations, adding clarity to the authority of the City Council to accept or choose not to accept such donations, and also going through some of the exhibits you see attached to this proposed policy, putting things in a format. So we have the agreement that an individual would prepare and acknowledge specific things about their donation, specifically that it becomes the property of the City of Albany. And that's an important one to note for things that are installed or fixtures within our city. Also, the purpose of a donation receipt. Walking through the policy quickly, it pretty much is itemized here, but one thing that I will call out is that there are two different types of donations. One is for a specific purpose, and one is just a general undesignated purpose. So that is another addition that we didn't have in the previous policy. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Are there any questions from the council?
Yeah, these look like good items. Did you use anything for reference, another city's policy or some boilerplate from somewhere?
A combination of several different policies, and actually did the heavy lifting on preparing the policy.
Okay, that's all, thanks.
Oh, and I'm sorry, I should add, our city attorney has reviewed this draft policy as well.
Any other questions?
I think the only question I have is just overall, you mentioned one difference. Are there any other major differences in this and what we've had before? It's worth calling out.
Well, the old policy basically only mentions about memorials and requests for capital improvement projects and the procedure of applying and stuff like that. It doesn't include monetary donations, and then also this includes policies on, what threshold the council's, the city manager can accept and what threshold needs to come to the council.
Thank you.
Two questions that I have. Did you have questions?
No, that's fine.
Okay. Two questions that I have are, it seems to be contemplated, well, this is going to turn into a comment, so I'll hold off. Let's see if we have any public comment. No public comment. Okay, then we bring it back to council. And now I'll make my comment. It seems to me, I passed around the East Bay Regional Park District and the City of Berkeley memorial policies, and I've been involved with several of these situations now, and our policy seems to be kind of a passive one, that people can come forward with ideas for things that they would like to give the city. And there was, and this has arisen in the context of the Memorial Park. There was a proposal for a mural. It arose in connection with the cross on Albany Hill, where the Lions Club was offering to put up Stars of David and Islamic crescents or whatever, people wanted to put up. They seem to believe they had the ability to do that without the city council's involvement. We have had a variety of things that have come up that someone comes in and says, I want to do this, and then we have a policy for evaluating it. What the East Bay Regional Park District does and what the City of Berkeley does, they identify things that are desired by the city. They can be benches, they can be projects that are in their CIP. There's a variety of things. And then a donor who wants to make a donation can provide that donation. And there's lots of sideboards. For example, there is a time limit. And we have this issue. There are items all around town that are that have donation plaques or memorial plaques, which may or may not ever even have been authorized by the city. We don't have any record of some of them having been authorized, but they seem to be there forever. And probably a great example is the torch on Key Route, which honors a couple of members of a now defunct service club for something that, although they may have been honorable gentlemen, they probably shouldn't be honored for what they're honored for on the torch. And it isn't clear whether we can do anything about that, and we need to. This is municipal property. Times change, people change, identities change, and sometimes it's necessary to take things down. And we have to be clear that we have that ability. I like the idea of just saying, it's essentially a 10-year proposition. As people become more, more people are cremated and fewer people are buried, but there is this human desire to have a place to go to put a flower or a rock or whatever it might be. I think it's important that we have a clearer policy that is more proactive in identifying what donations the city would like to take and under what circumstances. And I would suggest this is an important enough item that we might consider having a council subcommittee to get to, because this has been an issue that has been hanging over us for many years.
I think that's an interesting idea. It does occur to me that there are bigger projects in parks and street infrastructure and things that could be funded. I mean, it's not just benches. it's beyond benches anyway, and that there may be some way, sometimes you'll see a museum or some public structures built, and there'll be bricks that have names on them. So when you donate to that, you are memorializing perhaps somebody, or else making a donation in somebody's name. Your name gets mentioned there, but it's not just one item. It's that's funded. It's a much bigger thing.
We have it at the library, and there are other issues like, there are streets that have people, neighborhoods have come forward and said, how about if we raised money for a speed bump? Well, we have traffic calming policies, and then there's a social justice issue about whether, a street should get priority in traffic calming because it raises money, but then that might free up other money for less wealthy blocks. There's a lot to this, but I think my proposal is that we do not adopt this, but instead establish a council subcommittee to address these issues.
So I think we should adopt it. I think it vastly improves over what we have. And I'm concerned, I think your ideas, Mayor, are great, but I'm concerned with a city with limited resources that I'm not necessarily in favor of spending. I support a council subcommittee, but not in favor of spending any more staff time on this at the moment. The one thing that does seem like it could be worth some staff time sooner than later is identifying things that the city needs and publishing that as a wish list for donations. It seems like a very big bang for the buck. But beyond that, I don't think it's a priority right now, and that we should just go ahead and adopt what the great improvement that staff has done, and we can continue on with the council subcommittee with more.
I agree with you about staff time, and that's why I'm suggesting this be a council subcommittee. But I want to say this also. When someone comes forward with an idea for something they want to give to the city that is not part of any city plan or project, it immediately triggers a lot of staff work. And I saw this in connection with the proposed mural at Memorial Park that had not been approved, that wasn't part of any plan. And it turned out to have problematical aspects. There were cultural issues and aesthetic issues and all kinds of issues. I put a lot of work into it. Penelope put a lot of work into it. It turned into a work, just a lot of work. If we identify, if there is a policy like the one in Berkeley or the one at the East Bay Regional Park District, where we have very clear objects of donation, it's actually going to be much less work for the staff because there will be a clear path to doing, to guide potential donors and to guide the staff in accepting donations.
So are you saying that if we had something like that, that people would no longer come forward and say, I want to do a mural on the side of
No, that's right. It would be the Arts Committee that would, people could still come to the Arts Committee and say, wouldn't it be lovely to have a mural on a city building?
Right.
And here's a place I have in mind. But then it would come from the Arts Committee as part of its work plan to propose that an area be made available for a mural and a procedure for selecting a mural.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that in place now?
Pardon?
Isn't that what the Arts Committee does now?
That isn't how it worked with.
I'm not saying, no, but after that,
they've
spent
adopted
years working on their procedure. I think they've got that.
So if I may, the original thought is to leave it open for the unrestricted donation, that the they would apply, and city manager can refer to the appropriate advisory body to determine whether this is a workable plan or not a workable plan, and make recommendation to the council. So
a case-by-case basis. And my problem with that is, as you know, we saw with the Memorial Park mural, it's very hard to say no. Someone's coming forward and saying, I want to gift you by putting a whole bunch of hours of my time into creating something, and you get it for free. And even if it's not a good idea, and everybody realizes it's not a good idea, it's very hard to say no. So, you know, my preference would be that we decide what does the city want and need, and then try to match potential donors with things that the city wants and needs.
You know, I like the idea of having a list of things like Memorial Park with like 3 benches and they cost X amount of money. I sort of like that idea. But the 2 donation projects that I've been involved with was the Rotary one and the one that I did for Joey. And I don't think we're ever going to, I mean, we might say Peggy Thompson Pierce Street Park would like some trees, but I don't think we're ever going to say we'd like Memorial Rocks of, we want 3 in this park and 4 in that park. So I don't think we need to micromanage at that level. But I do like the idea of having suggestions for people, perhaps, is what that is. You know, if you'd like to donate some money to the city, we could use some trees here, we could use a bench here. I think that would be a good addition to it.
You know, I don't, everything you did was correct, and with regard to the memorial for Joey, and there's the memorial for Marla, and there are service club things all around town. But I would like us to think through what it means to have memorials in our parks. I mean, they will become, over time, more funerary than perhaps than we might want them to be. And especially if there's no time limit and there's no designation of the things that are appropriate for memorials, it could become problematical, in my opinion, to have too many private memorials in public parks.
Do you see any harm in adopting this revision, this new, better revision of the current policy, as well as doing what you say, pursuing the next step?
Well, so the changes to this, can you go over that again, how this, it might be good to get like a red line of the current policy and the
you know, I was going to,
version.
I don't
was
think
going
a
to
red
ask
line
for-
is possible. It's a completely different policy.
different.
Yeah.
It's very robust. You have the previous policy actually as an attachment to your staff report as
Yeah.
well. It's
Yes.
about-
I was going to ask for the same as well until I realized that it's, you know, the new one is just completely expanded and just subsumes the other one, which was just addressing a very small part of the donation.
it was just really the procedure
Yeah.
of how to apply and
Yeah. I don't see any harm in adopting the revised.
Well, what if we were to adopt what's before us tonight and then have a council subcommittee
That's what I'm
look
saying.
at
Yes.
coming together with some kind of list, which might amend what we're
That might
adopting tonight
involve
in some way?
amendments to this
Yeah.
as well. Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Good.
It sounds like we've got something going. Somebody want to make a motion?
Well, you might need to make it because you had the idea of what you want to do with this subcommittee, so.
Okay, well, I'm going to move that we adopt the proposed donation acceptance policy and form a council subcommittee to consider whether additional policies or changes to the policy are warranted.
I can second that.
Councilmember Moss,
Yes.
Councilmember Pilch,
Yes.
Vice Mayor McQuaid,
Yes.
Mayor Nason.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you all.
Are we creating the subcommittee, or
Shall we form the subcommittee?
do it? I can put it on a next agenda.
Yeah, that's right. Okay.
Could be a subcommittee of one. That's a subcommittee.
I was a subcommittee of one on the homeless task force, but that was another world, another day. All right, future agenda items. We have the marijuana issue.
Right.
I have spoken with the city manager about coming forward with a schedule of major planning documents, so we know what to expect when. We need the CIP update, the next budget, the review of the CAFR, the Measure M expenditures, we have all these different planning efforts, and I'd like us all to know the schedule of when to expect them and think through how they relate to each other. That's a future agenda item. Any others that people would like to request or mention?
No, I'm working on the marijuana one right now.
Working on the marijuana one. Slowly, okay. Then we are, announcement of city meetings and events. Does anyone wish to make any announcements? We have a list of fun things, including the Halloween on Solano. Let's enjoy. And we are adjourned.